Great. Are we ready to get started, everyone?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to Face to Face with Clayton Library Friends. I'm one of your moderators today, Jessica Collins, and we have a big team that makes this happen, and I'd like to recognize them. Serving today from our programming committee is myself, Mazzella Bolden, and Glenda Hayes, but there's usually always a lot of us programming committee people hanging out. That includes Gay Carter, and also our speaker today, who is Nick Cimino. If you've been around with our meeting for a little while, you know that Nick is a familiar face. He was the brainchild behind this when we got started at the very beginning of the pandemic. So we want to welcome you and to welcome Nick. And I've already put the handout in today's chat log. I'll do it one more time in case you missed it. Nick has a great program planned for us today on Irish genealogy. Let me read a little bit about Nick and introduce him to you formally. Nick Cimino began conducting his genealogical research in 1989 and has traveled extensively to courthouses, archives, and libraries in the United States and Canada. In preparation for his trip to Ireland, he developed his expertise in Irish genealogy and discovered that more and more can be done online, but that some work is still best done in Ireland. Nick traveled to Ireland in April 2008, spent time in Dublin and Belfast, with 5 days spent at the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. I'm guessing that's what the PRONI acronym is. Do we pronounce that PRONI?
That's how I say it.
Okay. So PRONI, the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. Nick was able to document many of his family stories and the records at PRONI and came back with many wonderful Irish genealogical souvenirs. In addition to PRONI, Nick spent time at the Ulster American Folk Park in Omagh, and you could pronounce that correctly for me too, which is an essential visit to understand the historical context of our Northern Irish immigrant ancestors. Other fascinating cultural sites he visited were the Ulysses S. Grant Ancestral Home, the walled city of Derry, and Belfast Castle, where one of his Irish relatives was even the gatekeeper. Nick is retired from the state of California Administrative Office of the Courts. He was responsible for facilities management of courthouses in 16 Bay Area and North Coast counties, and he currently serves as the Director of Programming for Clayton Library Friends. So let's welcome Nick today as he tells us about the orange and the green.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And thank you for the virtual applause from my cousin there, Michelle McClure. The orange and the green. So I don't know if y'all grew up like I did, celebrating St. Patrick's Day by wearing green so you didn't get pinched. So today I'm wearing both green and orange because I used to think, you know, being Irish was just green until I started delving into my family history and realized that there's also this orange thread that runs through it as well. So they're actually, you know, orange is the Protestants and green are the Catholics. And I want to thank Gay Carter for providing me with this Orange and the Green by the Irish Rovers. So I want to start out with a little musical introduction here. Can you guys hear it? Okay, so the biggest mix-up you have ever seen. My father, he was orange, and my mother, she was green. So his father was a Protestant and his mother was a Catholic, according to the words of the song. And you know, they in Ireland and the United Kingdom, they euphemistically refer to the Troubles, which the Troubles were a bloody struggle between two factions that were trying to control Ireland. And, I won't go into all the history of the Orange Order and all of that, but you can see that in this little logo here, it gives you the date. I believe I can't actually see it because my screen is somewhat obscured, but 1700 something. And you can see they're all dressed in orange and in their suits. And the Orange Order sort of evolved out of the Masonic orders to a certain extent. And so they have some similarities to the Masons, but their philosophy was they wanted to maintain their loyalty to the Queen or the King of England. And so they would even go to the extent of parading through the Catholic neighborhoods, which at certain points in the history really sort of inflamed the passions of the Troubles and led to some violence. But one of the things the song mentions is that the father was an Ulster man. So Ulster refers to this area right here along this red border. Everything north of the red border is considered Ulster. But interestingly enough, County Monaghan, County Cavan, and County Donegal are now part of the Irish Republic. So it's interesting. When I traveled, you would go across, we rented a car in Dublin, we drove up to County Fermanagh, and the people in County Fermanagh would make it a regular habit of driving across the border to get their gas because it was cheaper on the Republican side. And one of the other things that we did on that trip was, of course, we spent a fair amount of time in Fermanagh at a B&B there, but then we drove on up to Derry. And so County Derry, the county town or the largest town, is called by some Derry and by others Londonderry. And the road signs would say Londonderry so many miles. Well, then the graffiti artists had come in and sprayed out the London because its Derry is the Irish name of the place, and it became Londonderry after the Scots plantation. And so those tensions were still palpable when we were there in 2008, although it was peaceful enough where tourists were starting to flood into the place. Not exactly flood, because when they greeted us, they were like so happy to see tourists. Things had gotten peaceful at that point. So this is a picture of my great-grandmother here, Anna Elizabeth Banford. And she was born in 1860 in Missouri, and she died in 1938 in Westerville, Ohio, which is the home of Otterbein University. And this is her grandma, Nevin, who lived from 1804 to 1879. So Anna's parents were George Banford and Mary Nevin. So these are the two principal surnames that I was interested in when I was going to Ireland. I was maybe it was the green. I don't know if it was the orange, but I certainly had the luck of the Irish to know this. Because if you do not know this, it becomes very difficult to kind of narrow down your search. I mean, there are ways, but if you know it in advance, if you can dig deep enough into the family archives to find such things, then you will be money ahead. This photograph was taken at J.P. Ball's Photographic Gallery in Cincinnati, Ohio. Remember I said she was born in Missouri, but sometime during the Civil War, they left Missouri, I think due to the troubles that were going on in Missouri at the time, and went to Southwest Ohio. So I got all this from my grandfather's sister, Aline Maine Kavanaugh, who lived from 1902 to 1995. And I often describe her as one of the saints of the family history for preserving all these photographs, all these little scraps of paper that she'd written down, little details. And those are the kind of things that you need to be searching the attics and the closets and the drawers of all of your relatives to try to find. Okay, so this is what I know today. You can see I don't have a fully illustrated pedigree here on my Irish side, but I have been able to fill in a few details along the way. And part of this is due to the limitation of Irish records. There's only so much you can really do. But so that Grandma Nevin that we had the picture of, this is this woman right here, Anne Nancy Bamford. And this little family group here immigrated in 1850. And so they came together on a ship, which when I found the actual passenger list with them all together, that was another luck of the Irish type thing to find. Because you don't, oftentimes the husband will come and then the wife will come and then they get together and have children. And so it's really hard to figure that out in this early period of immigration. But again, my surnames were Bamford and Nevin. What's interesting is that I have Bamford here and here. So I think when George and Mary got together, they may have been cousins of some sort, but I haven't actually been able to kind of figure that all out yet. Okay, so you hear about the difficulty of Irish research, and that's due to record scarcity. They really only at this point have access to 2 full censuses, 1901 and 1911. There was what was called the Four Courts fire in Dublin, which destroyed a lot of the census records and other records for that matter, even some of the parish records. But you do have parish records back to 1845. And then, amazingly enough, they have really good vital records going back to 1864. So that helps to kind of fill in the gaps. But, a lot of our Scotch-Irish people came in the 1700s. So these may not be helpful to you. Prony holds microfilm for the Church of Ireland parish records. So again, Church of Ireland is kind of like Church of England, only in its Irish form. And Church of Ireland is a Protestant denomination as opposed to Catholic. The NLI, or the National Library of Ireland, holds the Catholic parish records. Okay, so like I said, you need that townland. You need to try to localize it as much as possible. And if you can get it to a parish, that's great. If you can get it to a county, I'll take it. But if all you know is they were born in Ireland, you're going to have a tough go. In one of my earlier presentations, I had this Sean Ruid website. That Townland database is now replaced by this one. So I don't think, I think I a handout needs to be updated to include this particular website. Okay, so American mapping is done by the U.S. Geological Survey. The Irish mapping is done by the Ordinance Survey of Ireland. And so it's very similar in terms of the maps. It's kind of like a topo map that you would get from USGS, but this is an Ordinance Survey map. And it does show the townland names here, and it does actually show the outline of the property boundaries as well. So getting your hands on these maps is important because it helps to kind of illustrate where your ancestors lived and what the townland names were and so forth. So depending on when your ancestors immigrated, and we're talking really during the United Kingdom period, and that's why I have the Union Jack here as opposed to the Irish flag, because all of these records are actually United Kingdom records that were created at that time. And so censuses, 1901, 1911. Prior to that, you're looking at the Griffiths Primary Valuation. They really don't have much in the way of census prior to 1901, but there are a few scraps. And again, if you were like me and had the luck of the Irish, you would find your family in an early census record. And then if you go back to the 1820s, you're looking at what are called the tithe allotment books. And that's basically like a tax record. A tithe is like a tax. Okay, so every 10 years, the census was taken from 1821 to 1911, but there was not a census done for 21. This was sort of the transitional period when the Irish Republic was getting its foundation. They did do a census in 1926, as you'll see at the third bullet here, but they have 100 year as opposed to our 70+ year requirement. So it doesn't come available for a while. And as you can see, 21, 31, 41, and 51 were largely destroyed by fire in that Four Courts fire in Dublin. They actually, for some reason, destroyed a lot of the censuses as well, that the government did. And some of the stories that you hear, there's conflicting stories as to why they did that. I heard something about just pulping it for the paper. So this is an example of a 1901 census. And the thing that really jumps out at you is religious profession. These are all Roman Catholics here. And so I found this particularly useful for, I mean, when you go to a foreign country, what do you want to do? You want to meet your relatives, right? So you got to kind of do descendant genealogy as well. So this is where I found this to be the most useful. And once you get there and you meet some of the descendants, then you might be able to collect some of the stuff from their attics and their closets, and you know, you might find some stuff there, and I did. So you know, I was looking for everybody with the surname Bamford and Nevin, and these are not, of course, Bamford or Nevins. These are Condons. But the other thing that jumps out at you is they actually give the birthplace down to the county or city, which that's a pretty handy little piece of information as well. Okay, so going back, when you're looking at the freeholder records, Prony is one of the places that holds those. They, of course, hold them for the counties of Ulster. You know, there's other websites that have the tithe allotment, and then we talked about Griffiths Valuation. Ask about Ireland.ie. That's one of the best ones because it actually has those maps I was showing you earlier. But now we're kind of into understanding the politics of governments and which government holds what. You can see Prony is a UK institution, which is the Union Jack, as opposed to the .ie, which that is an Irish website. Okay, so Nevin. So again, I was looking for any kind of a record that it included the surname Nevin, and I happened to know what the townland was, so I was able to drill right into all the Nevins that were in County Fermanagh, and they happen to all be in Refitting. I think this is also Refitting, but it was just a transcription error. So this is what it actually looks like in the original, and you can see the spelling of Refitting here. Refitting, a house and lands. So that's the place and the nature of the freehold is what we're looking at here. So Refitting is the townland, and so it's somewhat duplicative here because you have the townland here and you have it here, but sometimes it might be more descriptive. Like here you have George Nixon. He lives in Nixon Hall. So what does that tell you? Maybe he's somebody of means that maybe is more of a Lord of the Manor type. All right, so tithe allotment. Here's an example of what a tithe allotment might look like. And because you can't read that, I thought I would just give you a list of people that I found in what was known as the Ahalurker Parish, Refitting Townland in 1833. And this was everybody. So there were the Beatties and the Brooks. See Sir Henry Brooke, that's something you want to watch for, because that is your landlord, most likely. Lucy's, there's several Lucy's, and there's a couple of, they're calling them Nivens instead of Nevins at this point. Okay, so here's an example of what Griffiths Valuation looks like. And again, it's the townland and the occupiers. Lagavuren is the name of the townland, and then it says Barrack Lane South. So that sounds to me like a road type descriptor. And then it lists all the occupiers. Then here it tells you the immediate lessors. So that's the person who leased the land to the occupier. And again, that's important information that you need to pay attention to. And then it gives a description of the tenement. Sometimes it's just a house, sometimes it's just a garden, sometimes it's a house and a garden, sometimes it's a house and a yard. But then it tells you acres, roods, R-O-O-D-S, and perches are the land measurements. And you can see most of these are less than an acre. And then the appraised value. So in Griffiths Valuation, again, looking at the Nevins for County Fermanagh, Ahalurker Parish, 1862, you can see there were several Nevins at that point, and they were in different townlands. Taddy Ray, Refitting, Mulafad. Love these names, don't you? All right, so other vital record type things that you want to look for: BMD, birth, marriages, and deaths, where to find them. So there's the .ie version and there's the UK version. And the .ie is based in Dublin and the UK is based in Belfast. They each have their own general register offices. And then there are also local registrars. And a lot of this is on Family Search as well. Okay, parish registers. Now, I mentioned Emerald Ancestors. They had in the pre-meeting, but Emerald Ancestors was a fee-based website, kind of on the ancestry.com idea, but not quite as a big a deal as that, of course. And they, in addition, had published books that you could purchase. You could get them in an ebook or what have you. But parish records are going to be your baptisms and your marriages and your burials, and they would be found in these various locations, the Irish National Archives. So the Church of Ireland has its own library, which is this next bullet. And then PRONI, or the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, would also have, at the time they had microfilm, but I believe they've digitized a lot of these as well. And then for Presbyterian records, you would go to the Presbyterian Historical Society. So as an example, you know, I've mentioned Ahalurker. The other townland that was of interest for us was our parish. These are parishes, excuse me. So we're in Ahavea, the Diocese of Clogher, County of Fermanagh, and the variant forms of the parish name are Brookborough. And Brookborough is actually a town, and Brook, as you will see, is the name of the Lord of the Manor. So Enniskillen is a city, but these are rural parishes. But Enniskillen Parish includes a lot of the rural areas surrounding Enniskillen, which is the county town of Fermanagh, and other places you may find this. So I thought I was able to, I thought I had linked this. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is the Catholic parish registers at the National Library of Ireland. And what I thought was really cool was this locator map as you scroll down. Okay, so I'm in County Fermanagh. And so when you click on Fermanagh, it draws all the parishes, which we saw that in the previous image. And then if we had been looking at Ahavea, but if you want to look at Ahalurker, you click there, and then you go up here and you click again, and it gives you the information that's available for the Catholic parishes of Ahalurker. And you can see 1835 to 1881. So that goes back a ways. Not everybody's ancestors were in Ireland at that period of time, but if yours were, then you might find them in these parish registers. So let's get out of this. Cemeteries. Cemeteries are fascinating in Ireland. They might tell a whole family history just on one stone. So if you get an opportunity to actually go, or if you can find any kind of a cemetery website, whether it be Find a Grave or Billion Graves, or there's a lot of Irish transcript sites. County Heritage Centers have this information. If you go there, you might, I mean, you can try writing to the parish minister or priest. I didn't have a lot of success doing that. These are busy people that don't usually respond to genealogical inquiries. You may have to contact like a professional genealogist to really have them go to a cemetery and look and photograph the stones of the surnames that you are interested in, but it can be done. So this is one of the individuals that I met, and there were so many, and I don't really only have time to talk to you about one of them, but his name was Bertie Morrow. And I had actually connected with some cousins of his, but then come to find out he was also a cousin. So he is a Nevin descendant. But in this particular case, he was showing me some of the Bamford graves at the Ahalurker Cemetery. And he took me all over County Fermanagh. And my wife Robin says, do we have to go to another cemetery? Do we have to go to another old church? But, you know, that is the life of a genealogist's spouse. You know, she has to endure. And she's the most impatient person in the world, most patient person in the world, and is now even going to the extent of allowing me to go to Sicily and go through that same process of discovery. But she insisted this time. So I have to tell you, you know, we were going to go and visit all of these sites, you know, these Irish tourism sites. And we visited the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, and it was like, oh my goodness, what a wealth of information and documents. And they would just bring you out the original sheepskin, and oh, it was fabulous. And then they would make copies for you. And so I said, well, you know, I'd kind of like to come back. And we ended up spending 5 days at the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. My wife is a saint. I don't know how she puts up with me. So this was another cemetery image that just blew my mind. The turf was actually grown over the top of the stone, and you can see how it's sort of imprinted. The letters are in the turf itself, and you know, how we would have ever known that this was there, but there was, you know, a slight depression, so I just sort of reached into the turf and started pulling, and there was a stone that was under the turf. Of course, I carefully laid it back as much as possible, because I think that turf is actually preserving that stone in a beautiful state. But I mean, it didn't happen to be one of my stones, but it was beautiful nonetheless. Okay, so I mentioned the Lord of the Manor. I hope you all are fans of Downton Abbey and have learned a little bit about the Lord of the Manor, because that was Irish life. You know, you talk about the Irish plantation, or the plantation of the Ulster Scots. And so these English and Scottish lords came to Ireland, and they brought some of their tenants with them, and they established control of Ireland. And so a lot of these records that they date back to the time of the plantation are found in these Irish estate records. Prony has a good collection of them. The National Library of Ireland, the National Archives of Ireland, they also have estate records. But Prony is where I looked at estate records, and you can just look at the list. I actually found an account record of when Thomas Nevin, my ancestor, left in 1850. I could tell that he had passed it to another family member. His leasehold was passed to another family member. So by looking at these estate records at Prony, much was revealed. And so this is, you know, I mentioned the Brooke family. Well, this is the Colebrook, or the Brook Estate. And, you know, now, because they have been divested of their huge land holdings, they're having to find other ways to keep these manor houses going. And so they were into the deer stalking business, and they would, you know, have people stay there and take them hunting. And But here's a list of even more types of records that you can find in some of these estate records. The Irish Land Commission papers, that's all about how the divestiture of lands had occurred. And, you know, plans and maps I found especially valuable, which you will see in a moment here. Here's a picture of the Lord of the Manor displaying some of the antlers. And of course, then there was also schools on the estates and lists of aid recipients and valuations and all sorts of stuff that's in these collections. And they're basically manuscript collections. That not a lot of this has been digitized. So that's why I still say there's a piece of Irish genealogy that has to happen on site. So anyway, this D998/26/295, that is a Prony reference number for a lease that was issued by Sir Henry Brooke of Colebrook, County Fermanagh, to Richard Nevin and Thomas Nevin for 25 acres, 2 roods, 5 purchase of Refitting, County Fermanagh. So again, 1812. The thing about Irish leaseholds is they base them on lives. Now, lives can be anybody. They can pick one of their children, they can pick the Lord of the Manor's child, but oftentimes they are, you know, it'll explicitly say, like in this example, the eldest son of Richard Nevin, one of the lessees, and Thomas at that time was 4 years old. So that is a piece of information that, in lieu of having an actual baptism record or what have you, you can use to establish the birth of one of your ancestors. Okay, so this is a map, and it says PT of Refitting, so part of Refitting. And you can't read this, but it says that that is the road to 5 Mile Town. And 5 Mile Town is right on the border of County Fermanagh and County Tyrone. And then, so this area here is kind of interesting. It's representative of what's called a turf bog. And turf bogs were important because that's where you got your fuel, is you would go cut the turf and you would burn the turf in your fire, and that's how you would heat your home. And then these are, the White Hill is another townland, Taddy Knuckle is another townland, Demesne, that's actually a D, D-E-M-E-S-N-E. Demesne is the property that is kind of the personal property of the Lord of the Manor. And so it was bordering on the Demesne. And of course, this has got a scale to it. And that was 1812. Now we go forward to 1841 and we can see, okay, Thomas Nevin and Richard Nevin are still the leaseholders, but you can see there's actually been a demarcation of their split. It still shows the bog here, and these little numbers indicate the acres. So there's 11 acres there and 11 acres there, and then 10 acres down here. And again, the word Demesne, and another townland, Tatton Lee. And this shows the neighbor, Samuel Beatty. And so this is, it's entitled Sketch of Richard and Thomas Nevin's Part of Refitting, and October 1841 is the date. So, so not everybody can go there. Using some of the online services, but if you can go there, getting a genealogist guided tour would be a great way to go if you can afford it. There's these various online services that help you find your ancestors in Ireland. If you go to the Association of Professional Genealogists website, apgen, appgen.org. That's another place where you can find Irish experts. So this is what Prony looked like in 2008. It was, I wouldn't call it ramshackle. It was still in pretty good order, but it had some deferred maintenance on the building. And but then after I left, they provided this shiny new building in 2011 for Prony. And this is in what's called the Titanic quarter. Belfast was a shipbuilding town, and the Titanic was actually built in the shipyard there in Belfast. So it's now part of this whole tourist zone. And, you know, so you can be there in Prony, and you can send your spouse off to go tour the shipyards and take the on and off tour of Belfast. And, you know, you'll be happy and they'll be happy. So this is Bertie Morrow, and we were actually on the ground there. And I'm telling you, there's just nothing quite like the opportunity to walk the ground of your ancestors. It's extremely moving to me. I hope you have the opportunity to have a similar experience. Whether it be in the United States or in Europe or Asia or wherever your ancestors hail from, or Africa, go there. Go there now. Even if you're not prepared, go and walk on the ground and get a sense of what it's like to be in a foreign country, what might motivate an immigrant if they came here voluntarily, or what would be left behind both by the immigrants and the enslaved. You know, that feeling of home never really goes away. And, you know, we're fortunate in the United States to have so many homes that are part of our heritage throughout the United States, throughout the world. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm willing to take questions if there are any.
Thank you, Nick. That was great. I love this last picture.
Yeah, this is, I had to inject this one in there. I had abbreviated the presentation, and I'm like, where's that slide? You know, I said, oh, I actually gave this presentation to the Southern California Genealogical Society. They had a online forum type thing where they invited me to do a presentation. It's one of the first, you know, before Zoom, when you were doing webinars and stuff. And so this is just an abbreviated version of what is a much longer presentation, but I had to include this slide.
Great.
You'll just have to take us on a guided tour, Nick.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to go back.
So if
Good.
you have questions for Nick, pop them into the chat box, or we're a very informal group. Feel free to unmute yourself and turn on your video and chime in. I think we saw a couple of things as the presentation was going along. Natalie McLean and Mary Hollis kind of had the same question or situation. If your Irish ancestors, well, actually, Natalie is a little bit different than Mary. So Natalie asks, I guess I'm out of luck with my Irish ancestors if they all came in the early 1700s. And that's my question too. Is there any hope for us if we're researching early 1700s Irish ancestors?
There is always hope, but I think it's a thin hope for actually finding documents associated with 1700s. There are a few out there, and if you explore the Prony website, you'll see some of those 1700s type documents, but they're few and far between.
Okay. As for Mary Hollis, hers were not as early, her ancestors were not as early as yours, but 1851 and 1853. What kind of tips can you give for people in the same situation as Mary?
Well, you always start with US records first. And if you can find a naturalization, like I mentioned, my cousin is with us, Michelle McClure. I actually did find a naturalization for our McCrory ancestor. He came in the 1830s, and it actually gave his county of origin, County Monaghan. So definitely you want to look for records in the US first, and you really want to look at the places where they lived in the United States and find out what sort of naturalization records might exist. Look at all the census records. Look at your county histories to see if they managed to get their name in the mug book, because oftentimes there'll be stories about where they came from. You want to then move perhaps to the passenger list. If they came with somebody, if there's a story that they came with somebody, or if you can, it's really hard with individual travelers. But trying to find a place of origin. If you have a specific birth date, you can possibly look now with some of the websites and do like a date-based search, and then look at everybody of the same surname. Of course, if your surname is really common, then the level of difficulty just made a quantum leap. But the more you can narrow down the locality, the better off you will be.
June Dowdy writes, I believe my ancestors were here before the French and Indian War.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, every once in a while, though, you should be looking at early history of these migrations and looking at, okay, there people just like the Lord of the Manor came to Ireland. The Lords also came to North America, and they brought kind of their estate. So if you know that your ancestors associated with a particular group that migrated to a particular location, and there might be something in the histories that would talk about that group and where they were from and who the principal leader of their group was, and then focusing on that leader and his biography and his history and his land records and where he came from in Ireland.
Anna Datalo writes, amen to the thrill of walking ancestral ground. That's very cool. Look, sounds like Theresa Rundell got to visit Ireland also. Do you want to tell us about it, Theresa?
It wasn't Ireland, it was Germany.
Oh, Germany.
Sorry. But it was
No,
still
it's
a thrill.
just
Yeah, I imagine there's a fair number of people that have had the experience of being in some sort of an ancestral homeland.
Mary Hollis asked, can you put up the link to Prony again, or put the slide up again? Is that the one that had two different URLs, one for Ireland and one for the UK?
The best thing to do is just Google Prony, P-R-O-N-I.
Well, being a first generation American, my ancestors only go back to 1922 and 1924 when my parents came.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been to Ireland many times, and I think Prony is the best site to go to. I think the records are better in Prony than they are in Dublin.
Mm-hmm.
And they have better facilities. So you might go to their website and search what they have.
Good
So
tip.
Tom, did your ancestors actually come out of Ulster, or was it?
Yeah, my
another-
mother was from County Donegal and my father from County Antrim.
Oh, okay, yeah, so you definitely are.
So
an
I'm
Ulster
definitely
man.
Scots-Irish.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't help but notice also, Tom, show off your t-shirt today. So appropriate. So were you able, Tom, well, were
Yeah,
you able, have you done trips back since you have close family who can introduce you to your history over there?
I still have a lot of cousins in Ireland. So we kibitz back and forward. None of us know anything, so.
Another question from Mary Hollis. Are there common departure points that we could think about for ships coming to North America?
Well, for Irish immigrants, you're going to see a lot coming out of County Cork, some out of Dublin, some out of Liverpool. So it
From
varies.
Ulster, they came from Derry a lot.
Mhm.
My mother came from Derry. My father from Cork.
So, but he was an Ulsterman from Antrim, you said,
From
right?
Antrim.
But he traveled down to Cork and departed there.
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I was late joining, so I missed most of it, but I have a grandfather immigrated from County Derry in Northern Ireland as a young man in 1914, I guess. But he had written a family memoir, so I was able to go back to his grandfather,
Mhm.
who was born in 1802. And that's where I've hit my brick wall, is at 1802. I've got his name, but I know nothing about siblings or parents on him. But I have also gone back to visit his family home. And that was fun because the owner actually saw us standing outside talking about the house, and she came out and invited us to come in the house. So we actually got to go inside. But so I didn't know if you mentioned one thing that had helped me with local libraries when I was over there. They had a book that they had a linen factory, the family did, and there was a photograph of one of the McCanns with all the employees of the shirt factory that was available at the library. So that was another source if it didn't come up. If I don't know if you were talking about also going over there where your sources are. And the other question I had is, was there a handout or anything on there, the sources that
Yeah,
I missed?
if you go to the ClaytonLibraryFriends.org, the event page.
Okay.
And I think Jessica can probably paste that into the chat log one more time.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks
So
for
I'll
the
just put it in-
reminder.
okay. Great, thank you.
So yeah, she just put it in the chat log for you.
So I had a couple that I wrote down, a couple of questions I wrote down while we were doing this. So these names of places and counties are very unfamiliar to me since I haven't done any kind of Irish genealogy. Where do you learn how to pronounce them, since they're not commonly ones we would sound out in English?
I in my method of doing things, I just say it very affirmatively, and nobody questions me because they have no idea.
Okay, that makes sense. So the house on the last slide, how typical is it for ancestral homes to still be around in 2022?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know to what level things are being preserved over there. It looked like there were quite a few things that were sort of tumbled down in various locations. But that's just my little exposure to Ireland.
So it's not like Houston where something gets about 40 to 50 years old and they knock it down.
Well, I think there is a preservation ethic there, number one. I mean, I know even like some of these parish churches have been converted to houses, and they've done some pretty amazing things with them. But the preservationist friend is poverty. when there's a poor country, they tend not to tear things down and, build anew in that spot. And so I think because Ireland has experienced such grinding poverty for centuries, that a lot of that historic fabric is still there.
I'm here. I wrote it down in the chat, but why this sudden interest in, now to me it's sudden, I'm coming back from not doing much the last few years, and there seems to be a tremendous focus on Irish and Scottish genealogy right now. Roots Tech and Ancestry and Family Search are all offering up information about Irish ancestry. And I found out maybe about 10, 11, 12 years ago that actually I have a whole lot of Irish in my background, or I found that out. And of course, my percentages now are pretty low, but why now?
That's an interesting question. I think I would be speculating a little bit to answer it, but I'll give it a whirl anyway. I think because so many of us do have either Scots-Irish or Irish ancestry, that there's this yearning amongst the people that are interested in genealogy to fill in the gaps on their family history. And from what I've seen, Ireland has done and both Ireland and Northern Ireland have done an excellent job of using cultural tourism as a way of helping their economies.
Nick, I think you're absolutely right. One of the least expensive places to travel in Europe right now, okay, is to Ireland. You can get a complete hotel, air, car, and everything for less than $1,000 a person, which is really, really inexpensive for international travel. And I think they're building on that. People see this Irish in them and they think, oh, I'll go and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just creates more interest in it. And so I think you're absolutely right. It's the cultural tourism that they're building on, because what do they have for people to look at? It's beautiful scenery and old buildings and heritage and stuff. But you're also right about the poverty. I mean, let's just remember that they're very the poverty is really bad. And then the times of trouble, which kept a lot of people from going to Ireland back in the 60s and the 70s, because it was so bad and so dangerous and everything.
Well, also, I know when we were planning this, I failed to mention today is St. Patrick's Day. So I believe that's why we chose this program for today also, and why you might be seeing lots of, especially DNA offers for finding your Irish heritage. Might be because we associate March and March 17th with St. Patrick's Day.
Well, I was reading today something from the DAR Facebook posting, and they posted that on this day in 1780, George Washington gave a holiday to all of his troops that were with him in one of the forts in New Jersey. It was a bad winter in there, because to celebrate Irish heritage, because he had so many Irish people who were in his army there, to celebrate Ireland as a way of thanking them for being in it. And that was one of the first noted times of celebrating St. Patrick's Day.
Well, great. Well, I see our time is coming to a close. I know there might be a few other. Oh, great. Somebody answered Mary's question in the chat. So Mary, if you look down there, Mary was asking where Queens County might be. And it looks like Susan Hoover answered a question about a county name change. So thanks, Susan. That was great.
Yeah, with the Republic, they changed the name of Kings County and Queenstown County.
Oh, good.
For
And
obvious
that's kind of in the
reasons.
same spirit as removing London from Derry.
Right, right.
Awesome. Well, if you have any other questions for Nick, visit the event page because his information's on there, all of his downloads for handouts today. I think you had 3 different downloads, as well as a link to his website, which is ancestorpuzzles.com. You can ask Nick any of your questions that maybe you think of after we leave today. I do want to plug one other thing before we go. If you're enjoying Face2Face, we'd love to have you join us as a member of Clayton Library Friends. Of course, this program is done free of cost for anyone who just wants to hang out with us every other week, but you can help support our ongoing costs and also help us acquire more materials for Clayton Library by becoming a member. It's $20 for a yearly individual membership and $25 for a household. And I think if we have a moment, Mitch, are you able to tell us some of the upcoming things that are happening at Clayton Library?
You caught me. Let me
I
see.
should have warned you ahead of time. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. We do have a presentation tomorrow with Clayton Library Presents. It's by David Rencher. He is with Family Search. And excuse me, he's with the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. And he will be doing, his topic is going to be immigration with an E, immigration and immigration research for Ireland, I believe is the main topic. And so you can still, there's still time to register for that on the Clayton Library website or the HPL website. That you can find links there in the calendar, in the events calendar. And just a note, we are starting to use the Teams software for our presentations. That'll start tomorrow. So you don't have to have Teams loaded. It will open up in a browser like Zoom does, but you can download Teams if you want the added functionality. It is a free application from Microsoft. And I'll also say that our hours have changed. We've added more hours that we're open now. We're still open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 5, but on Thursdays now, today, we're open from 12 to 7. So if you aren't able to get in the morning and you have maybe an evening time to do some research, we are available again with our late hours on Thursday. So that's about it, I believe. I believe the meeting rooms are going to be opening up pretty soon for reservations as well. So if that's something that you need, that might be something to look into as well.
Great. Thanks, Mitch.
Sure.
And let's
Jessica,
all, yes, ma'am.
Jessica, remember our next meeting is going to be April the 7th, and Susan Kaufman is going to talk about the 1950 census.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mozella. So by then, what's the date of that? April
I think it's the 7th.
The 7th. That gives us 6 days to dig in and come and bring our fun findings for Sue's presentation.
Well, let's
Let's all
remember it's not indexed on April 1st.
Right. So you have to do a lot of digging.
Yes.
Well, thank you again, Nick. That was an excellent presentation. Let's all give him a round of virtual applause. And we'll see y'all again in about 2 weeks.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
I'm saving the chat. You'll be getting it.
Okay.
Is there going to be any kind of an after meeting?
I do have one thing to mention.
Okay, I'm gonna pause I'm gonna stop the recording. Is that okay?
Okay.